The volcano is likely to bring acid rain. A League of Legends fan has been denied a visa to Iceland, a dolphin and her calf, and more on this episode of the Reykjavik News Desk. First up on the Reykjavik News Desk, the effects of the volcano are being felt much farther afield than just Reykjanes, but there's plenty going on there too. First of all, the police in southwest Iceland decided to close access to the eruption site on Saturday evening due to a very small minority of people behaving poorly. And by that, I mean you had folks who were getting way too close to the lava, attempting to dance on the lip of the crater, and in one case, throwing beer cans into the lava itself. And to me, this is one of the nuttier things to do at a volcano. I mean, what do you expect will happen? Well, I suppose if they're full, unopened beer cans, you expect that they'll explode upon contact with the lava. But either way, all you're doing is you're leaving an archaeological record behind so that Icelanders thousands of years from now will uncover these remains and conclude, ah yes, these ancient Icelanders used to sacrifice alcoholic libations to the volcano, probably for ceremonial religious purposes. Anyway, it looks like they're going to continue to close access to the eruption site at 6 o'clock in the evenings, and that's mostly because they don't have the staffing power to keep the area staffed around the clock. And the eruption site is getting a lot of visitors still. Now, I stress that the vast majority of people who visit the site are behaving perfectly well and, enjoying the site of the volcano in the safest possible way. But even people with the best of intentions are still ending up in trouble. For example, it was reported that around 1 a.m. last Friday, a family required help because their 2 small children were too tired to walk back from the eruption site. And I just want to emphasize again that the eruption site is no place for small children or people with cardiac and pulmonary problems. And just as an aside here, most of the people requiring help at or near the eruption site have been foreign tourists. And no, we don't know what nationality they are. I've seen people in the comments saying these are definitely Americans. And as an American myself, let me just say, you are probably right, but we still don't know. Furthermore, there are far, far more tourists going to the eruption site than Icelanders, so it would just make sense that the majority of the people requiring help are the tourists, just by dint of sheer proportion. In any event, if you're planning on traveling to Iceland and you're already here and you want to visit the eruption site, please visit safetravel.is first. It's in English, it has all the latest updates on closures and air quality conditions, and they have a very handy list of how to prepare to go to the eruption site so you can do so safely and have a wonderful time. But as I've also said, lava is not the least of your worries. You see, lava is contained to the eruption site. It's the gases, and there are numerous toxic gases that come out of eruptions that you have to worry about because they can travel very far afield. And we had gases all over the southwest Iceland over this weekend, and some of these gases go into the clouds. And you guessed it, that can mean acid rain. Fortunately, if you know Iceland, you know we've got wind out the wazoo. You walk down a city street and the wind is blasting you in the face. Turn a corner, and the wind is still blasting you in the face. How, you ask? How is the wind making 90 and 180-degree turns? That's Iceland, baby. Our wind changes direction more often than a state senator 6 months before Election Day. So you can rest assured that the acid rain will pass, and the gases will also change direction. In other news, the Directorate of Immigration continues to be weird and arbitrary. Now, anyone who has moved to Iceland has at least one nightmare story about dealing with the Directorate of Immigration, also known as UTL. They wield enormous power over whether or not you can move here. They will give you contradictory and vague advice and information, and our own immigration laws have vast differences of qualification depending on whether you're from Scandinavia, Europe, or the rest of the world, which some might argue is a teensy bit racist. But what a lot of people don't know is that UTL can also hold sway over whether or not you can even visit Iceland. And that is dependent on whether or not you need a visa to enter the country. And sometimes their decisions are really hard to understand, and this story is a great example of it. So this woman from China applied for a visa to Iceland. She said that she planned to spend 2 weeks here, that she had fallen in love with the country, watching nature videos with the landscapes. She had watched a League of Legends tournament that was held here, and she planned to do some hiking on glaciers and visit Blue Lagoon and travel around the country and take in the sights. Now, this all sounds like a very typical visitor to Iceland, and a very normal one, too. It's certainly more normal than my initial reason for coming to Iceland, which was I read a book about Norse mythology, and I was like, cool, I think I'll visit Iceland. Anyway, her visa was denied. Why? Well, this is where it gets weird. So UTL called her and started asking her questions, wanting to know her exact itinerary for her visit to Iceland. And she said that she had booked most of her itinerary through a tour company, and she didn't have all the exact details. But then she cut off the conversation, saying that she had to go into a very important meeting, and UTL found this suspicious, which is super weird. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, UTL does not give you a heads up about when they're going to call you. They just do. And if you call somebody without letting them know ahead of time that you're going to call them, you can't exactly be surprised if they're in the middle of something or on their way to doing something important. But it gets better. UTL also called a friend of hers, and this friend confirmed that yes, they had planned to visit Iceland. And if the weather was bad, they were going to spend most of their time in Reykjavik, but otherwise, yeah, they wanted to go on a glacial hike and visit the Blue Lagoon. But UTL wanted more exact information, but the friend said that they hadn't booked everything yet, and UTL asking for these very specific details about every single part of their visit is really strange to me. I mean, when I first came to Iceland to visit, I had no idea what I was going to do, where I was going to go, and when. I didn't even know where I was sleeping the first night. And I'm sure that's a case for a lot of tourists to Iceland the first time they come here. You don't know necessarily. You might have a copy of The Lonely Planet, but otherwise, a lot of folks, they're just going to wing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Literally, the only thing that jumped out at me at this story that seemed a little bit odd was that UTL estimated that the total cost of this trip was going to be half of this woman's annual salary. But first of all, how do they know that this money wasn't just gifted to this woman or she hadn't saved it up? And second of all, how come UTL has access to this woman's financial history and knows what her annual income is? Why do they need to know this information? Anyway, the visa was denied, so yeah, UTL not doing much to beat the racism allegations. On the lighter side, a recent Gallup poll asked respondents about their smartphone use and the smartphone use of their spouses. What I thought was funny about this is that the poll also asked, do you think your spouse spends too much, too little, or just enough time on their phone? And I was like, yeah, who's going to say, no, I don't think my spouse spends enough time on their phone? I really wish they would stop trying to have a conversation with me and spend more time arguing with people on Twitter and doom scrolling and playing Subway Surfer. The answer is 1 out of 10 voters for the People's Party and the Center Party. That's who. These people said they don't think their spouses spend enough time on their phones. Meanwhile, 60% of Reform Party voters think their spouses spend too much time on their phones and should go touch grass, while 60% of Independence Party and Left Green voters think their spouses spend just enough time on their phones. And because it wouldn't be an episode of Reykjavik News Desk without it, let's get into animal news, Triple Threat Edition. First up, good news. Orca Guardians Iceland spotted a white-beaked dolphin and her calf swimming in Icelandic waters. It's whale watching season all over Iceland right now, and if you have sea legs, I highly recommend engaging in this. It's especially if you live someplace that doesn't have a lot of whales. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Well, I guess not once in a lifetime. You can come to Iceland as many times as you want, but it is a very spectacular experience to witness whales cavorting around in the waters. It's a really beautiful sight. And seeing a dolphin with her calf is a little bit uncommon. So you might catch a sight like that too. Second, gray lag geese in Iceland will soon breathe a sigh of relief as the sale of their meat and other products will soon be banned. This decision was made by the Ministry for the Environment with the reasoning that their population is in serious decline right now, and that if you ban the sale of their meat and other products, that's less incentive to hunt them, and not as many of them will be hunted. There's no word yet if there are any further restrictions on puffins, though, which have also been in serious decline right now and are also hunted. So if you see puffin meat on the menu in restaurants, don't order it, okay? And third, Have you ever gotten the COVID test? Well, you probably have, and you know how they go up in your throat with a cotton swab? Now imagine that happening to you, only you're a fish. There's a type of fish in Icelandic waters called a steinbítur, and that's the Icelandic name for the Atlantic wolffish. Now, these fish are normally very shy about people. If you try getting near them, they'll swim away or hide under a rock, cowering in fear. But there's another type of fish that looks very much like a steinbítur, as known as a graubitur, and they're like the exact opposite. They love to scrap. They will throw down at the drop of a hat. They will fight you. Now, this fish had been a source of fascination for a diver named Erlendur Bogason, and he wanted to know if the graubitur is a type of steinbítur or another species entirely or something else. So the easiest way to do this would be through collecting a DNA sample, and the easiest way to do that would be to simply catch the fish, but Erlendur didn't want to kill it. So he opted instead to take a DNA swab of this fish. I've linked to the video in the description. It's at the bottom of the article, and you don't need to understand Icelandic to appreciate the sight of a man in full scuba gear at the bottom of the sea giving a fish a good swabbing. Anyway, the DNA sample was taken and it was tested, and it turns out that yes, a graubitur is indeed a type of wolffish. Hooray, science! And lastly, if you're driving through Southeast Iceland and you want to pick up some beers for the campsite, be sure you do so at the right time. You see, you can only buy alcohol in Iceland from our government-run alcohol stores, and you can see what the sign for those stores looks like in this image here. Do not, I repeat, do not buy beer or wine from our supermarkets, because if you want to get alcohol in you, that is, because those products contain little or no alcohol whatsoever. This is on account of the fact that it's illegal to sell alcoholic products outside of the government-run stores or, of course, restaurants and bars, because our laws are weird. Anyway, the government-run store in Djúpavík, Southeast Iceland, has cut its hours due to lack of demand. They are only open from 4 to 6 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So bear that in mind if you're planning to go through Southeast Iceland, but of course, keep your bottles and cans closed while you're behind the wheel. So that's all I have for you today on the Reykjavik News Desk. Again, be sure to like and subscribe. And I just wanted to say that last Saturday's AMA was a lot of fun. It's up on my Patreon right now. It's public. You can watch it for free. And for $15 and $20 patrons, there's a new viewer poll on the Patreon right now. Now, the viewer poll is a poll that decides and dictates which single topic I cover in depth in a single topic video. And if you don't like any of the choices I provide, you can put one of your own in the comments. And it's always a lot of fun to dig into exactly what people want to see me cover in depth. And those are both things, the AMA and the viewer poll. These are both things that you can participate in through my Patreon, which again is linked in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marianne Ward, Christopher Hunter, Marianne Moores, Kimberly McDaniel, Iceman98, Octavia Hrund-Jonsdottir, and Alan Valgamay for being $20 patrons, Ian Kingsley and Laura Johnson for being $15 patrons, Christine Trowbridge, Hafstein Himilomi Reginason, Stephen Ellis, and Vivi Carvalho Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all from me here at the Reykjavik News Desk. Be good to each other.